suffer is that it poisons the soil around it. It's not a long-term thing. It's not like using Roundup, which will create a long-term issue. It's really only while it's live and thriving. It's releasing chemicals from its roots which really discourage other plants from growing near it. So as you can see, some plants don't think that too much.
Yes.
But what you can often find, which is a little note of hope, I hope I'll find one today, in South Africa they introduced a tiny little insect, and it's not really again, it's from Central America, and it feeds on the flower heads of Lantana. It doesn't pollinate them, it literally eats the flower, and that prevents it from forming fruit, prevents it from spreading. They also introduced something called Lantana bloom moth in the same parts of America, and that has by itself come from South Africa and Kenya to Zambia, and you will now find it coming to light, and it eats the leaves, it eats the stalks of the lantana, and so it's slowly killing it, which is good because it's slowly killing our woodlands. So,
is it any useful?
As far as I know, the only reason it was brought to Zambia is as an ornament. It is very pretty when it's in full flower.
Yes.
But it does, as it's quite toxic, it has some insecticidal qualities. Some people recommend boiling the leaves and mixing them with oil or dishwashing liquid, and then spraying them on your tomatoes or on your beans to get rid of aphids. But realistically, doing that with your dishwashing liquid will work anyway, and dishwashing liquid isn't great for your soil either. So, is that what I was? No, sorry. There was a fly I was hoping to see, which is a very good indicator for small-scale farmers.
Yeah. Why are they attracted to the water bodies?
So the first off, all life needs water, but male butterflies in particular, they get through a lot of salt as they're going around harassing female butterflies most of the time. Butterflies have never had any to as far as I know. But so as the mud is drying out, the water that's brought salt from the hillsides, from all the areas, is concentrating it as it dries out on the edges of the mud. And so the butterflies are really coming in search for salt. It's the same reason you'll find them on roads, after the rain season, on puddles, on hot days. You'll find huge numbers of butterflies. We've got a few different species there. You've got the bright yellow one. You might just be able to make out in the video.
Yes.
That's a grass yellow. They feed on St. John's wort and related wildflowers. Those are actually medicinal plants. So that if you find the females of those butterflies laying eggs, that can be an indicator that this is in that group of plants and could be used to treat certain ailments. I'm not going to recommend which ailments, because some of the things that those plants are recommended for are quite various. There's actually a butterfly that's landed while we've been talking here. You can see that the larger, darker one just close to us. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. That's actually a Maurus, one of the monarchs. And they are really fantastic because they're one of the first types of butterflies, large butterflies I've seen here, trying to lay eggs and develop on lantana. Their natural host plants are milkweeds, so they're another one that. Sorry, I talked to you off camera about another one. They take the toxins from the plant to defend themselves with, but they are dealing with one of our most problematic plants, which is really fantastic. The others are mostly veined whites, which you'll find all over Zambia, and the orange one is a false border. Those both feed on wild capers, some of which are edible, some of which are not. So, yeah. That's our butterflies.
Okay. Awesome.
Why are they attracted to the water bodies?
So the first off, all life needs water, but male butterflies in particular, they get through a lot of salt as they're going around harassing female butterflies most of the time. Butterflies have never had any to as far as I know. But so as the mud is drying out, the water that's brought salt from the hillsides, from all the areas, is concentrating it as it dries out on the edges of the mud. And so the butterflies are really coming in search for salt. It's the same reason you'll find them on roads, after the rain season, on puddles, on hot days. You'll find huge numbers of butterflies. We've got a few different species there. You've got the bright yellow one. You might just be able to make out in the video.
Yes.
That's a grass yellow. They feed on St. John's wort and related wildflowers. Those are actually medicinal plants. So that if you find the females of those butterflies laying eggs, that can be an indicator that this is in that group of plants and could be used to treat certain ailments. I'm not going to recommend which ailments, because some of the things that those plants are recommended for are quite various. There's actually a butterfly that's landed while we've been talking here. You can see that the larger, darker one just close to us. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. That's actually a Maurus, one of the monarchs. And they are really fantastic because they're one of the first types of butterflies, large butterflies I've seen here, trying to lay eggs and develop on lantana. Their natural host plants are milkweeds, so they're another one that. Sorry, I talked to you off camera about another one. They take the toxins from the plant to defend themselves with, but they are dealing with one of our most problematic plants, which is really fantastic. The others are mostly veined whites, which you'll find all over Zambia, and the orange one is a false border. Those both feed on wild capers, some of which are edible, some of which are not. So, yeah. That's our butterflies.
Okay. Awesome.
So right behind you, you've got two very useful trees, potentially very useful, I think, underused trees. So this one just up here is one of the straight thorned acacias, due to a recent name change there, Bachellias really, but they produce hard bubbles of sap, which can be used to make gum arabic, which is a food thickener. Can be a major export to some countries. And off over here we have, I call it tree hibiscus or a snot apple. Some people call it African bubblegum tree. So two wild trees that both produce foodstuffs. The fruit on this, for anyone who doesn't know, I think it's got a sort of treacle flavour. Some people disagree with that. You peel it off, you chew it, you salivate an awful lot, but it's quite sweet. But it's not lacking in nutrition. It's got sugar for energy, it's got a few of the vitamins, and like a lot of tree fruits, it's got a lot of the minerals, which, I mean, maize has quite shallow roots. So when you're just eating mealie meal all the time, you're not getting any minerals. Very mineral rich. Tree fruits that the tree has gone down a long way, it's got all the minerals it needs, and quite a few of those are going to be in its fruits too. So that's our way of doing what the butterfly is doing, getting a daily dose of salts. So yeah, so two potentially very useful things that just grow wild and I think should be encouraged. Sorry. We've got another useful tree just here. This is Citrustachys. It's a very common tree in disturbed areas. It's really our natural version of lantana. It's very, very aggressive, thicket-forming tree. It also produces gum arabic. It's not as high quality as from some of the acacias, but it can be used in very much the same way as a food thickener, as a soup thickener, as a to make sweets chewy, for example. So another useful one. Very pretty flowers as well, so a good thing to keep your pollinators fed outside of the crop season. We've got lots of the grasshoppers we were talking about. These are mostly Gymnobotrys, so they are pretty much the most boring grasshopper we have because they literally do what it says on the tin. They eat grass. Most grasshoppers are going to be a little bit more interesting. The Gymnobotrys is the most common one, for the simple reason that it really thrives on grass. And you can see this is quite a degraded habitat. The lantana is very dominant. You rarely see this much lantana in a habitat that hasn't had a lot of deforestation, like chopping and clearing and digging. So even subsistence level farming. In soil you often have a thin layer at the surface called cryptobiota, and that keeps a lot of non-native plants that aren't used to it from germinating. As soon as you have that disturbance, you have a lot more germination. This is one of the bush willows. Some of them are really fantastic timbers. I'm not convinced this is one of them. So the leadwood is a very, very notorious variety. So it's Combretum, so it's the same genus of tree, so it's the same group. Quite similar growth form, quite similar leaves, a lot bigger when it's mature. But that is such a hard wood. You've got examples in South Africa are still standing more than 100 years after they've died. Because even termites can't take them apart.
That's true, eh?
Yeah. So it's a very solid timber, very hard to work, but if it is worked, it makes very long-lasting, very resilient furniture. So they are not just useful in that they hold the environment together, they can reduce erosion, but they also have potential direct uses. And this over on the side is one of the Brachysteges on Wombos, so what our whole system is named after. Mostly used for charcoal, realistically, but a very valuable habitat for a lot of trees, a lot of insects, which then provide their own ecosystem services. Also, because they dominate this area, they are what's producing the oxygen we're breathing. They're what's holding the water in the soil the most, and they're what's fertilizing the soil the most. As far as I know, brachystegias haven't been shown to associate with any nitrogen-fixing bacteria, but they will grow in such poor soils that it's more or less inevitable it will eventually be found out.
Okay.
They are very tolerant to poor soils.
Okay.
You're following ants up the tree.
Now, we usually see this, which kind of looks like a disease.
Oh, these little marks here.
Yes.
So this is a lichen. It's not a disease. It's non-parasitic.
Okay.
It's a wonderful. It's a weird little symbiosis. I think there was something recently about it. Some of them being slime mold rather than algae, but it's basically a fungus and an alga cooperating. So it's two completely unrelated organisms. We're quite closely related to fungus compared to how close they are related to algae.
Okay.
And they are. So the fungus can't photosynthesize. It can't make food from light. The algae can, but the algae is dependent on a lot more water.
Okay.
And so by living inside the fungus's tissues, it's surviving without water, and the fungus is getting food from it, and it's just using the surface of the tree as a basically a place to have access to light. It's not taking anything from the tree.
Okay.
You will find in some places, usually in very dense forest, you have such a build-up of different species of lichen it can cause weight, and smaller branches can break off, but it's very rare, and it's not really an issue because those are usually quite shaded branches. But they are also a very good indicator of air health.
Okay.
When this type is fairly common around Lusaka, but when you have a large diversity of different species, you know that the air is quite clean because a lot of them are very fussy about pollution.
Okay.
So this is another lichen here. This faint green here, very different form, not nearly as showy. You also up in Northern Province you get a lot of what's called old man's beard, Usnea, which trails from the tree branches, and that's actually a source of quite a lot of ecotourism because some of our very rare birds nest in it, and you'd be surprised the number of people that fly out to Zambia just to find these very rare, hard to find birds. Which brings in, it'll be probably about 40-50 feet tall, very widespreading, and the brachystegias have a habit of dropping a lot of twigs and branches, which means if they're mature they can generate a lot of firewood without anything having to be chopped down.
Okay.
Which is a really valuable ecosystem service, I think. Obviously if that wood falls onto the ground it actually improves the soil as well, because all this woodland is very low nutrient, very dependent on fungus, and that fungus does need something to eat.
Okay.
And so fallen wood is a very good opportunity for that fungus.
Okay.
All of the...
Just mention the names once more.
Of the large trees?
Yes.
So this is a brachystegia. So it's a Mwombo. The Masasa is also a brachystegia. And so in the background you've got a larger, nice looking, but still not anywhere near mature tree, because a lot of the woodlands near Lusaka, there's a lot of charcoal harvest, and a lot of these trees will grow back if cut down, provided there's not too many fires. Okay. So I could cut this down to about here. You can see it's actually been cut down to here before, and it's coming back up. Okay. If a fire comes through, it'll kill those young shoots as they're coming back up. If no fires come through, they will regenerate, so they can be coppiced for high productivity. Okay. But yeah, they are very good trees, but they are all a bit younger than they should be. Most of this is brachystegia. Hence Miombo woodland.
Okay.
I'm trying to fly out. This up here, Karen calls it fried egg bush. I just know it as a Bauhinia. It's another one that it produces a vast quantity of flowers, very attractive to a lot of pollinators. In particular, it's attractive to a lot of sunbirds. So it's a very beautiful thing to have in your garden, and it's unlike a lot of the garden trees people put in for attracting birds. It is very drought resistant. You don't need to really water it or pay it any attention at all. Okay. And it's like a lot of native trees, it's a nitrogen fixer, so it's also fertilizing the soil around it. Okay. This is another of our sickle bushes that we talked about earlier, the gum arabic. Yes.
found in pairs?
When you find them wheeling around each other, none of the ones I'm seeing here are the same species. We've got grass yellow, we've got an African leopard butterfly over there. Doesn't savage anyone. We had an acrid. What often happens is you'll find that a male will maintain a territory. If another butterfly flies past it, even if it's not the same species, provides similar enough colouring to disrupt him, he'll fly up and fly around it to see if it's a female.
Okay.
Butterflies are mostly about harassing females. They're very pretty, but they are quite rapey. So I don't know if that's a taboo word to bring up on this. I generally, if I take children for walks, I have to reassure them that it's good to be big. Your life is not going to be anywhere near as horrible as an insect. We get by with a lot less parasites and a lot less discomfort.
Okay.
These large white butterflies flying here, these should be African migrants, and a lot of those will actually flown from north of the equator.
Oh.
So as the seasons shift, they move back and forth across the equator. Often it won't be the same butterfly making the return trip, but in some cases, their lifespan isn't very fixed. They really live until they're injured.
Really?
And so provided they escape the worst of the weather, which they do by flipping back and forth across the equator, they can go on a surprisingly long time. It's still not long for us, but some insects could go on a long time for us.
Okay.
See here again, people have been chopping down trees still, even though this is a protected area. Like a lot of places, I have protected more in Maine than anything else. So you can see regeneration. Okay. I mean, these young should be more. So I think this might be. Oh, hello. So we've got an insect here finally. So this is a tree hopper.
Okay.
So it's essentially a glorified aphid, but it's quite colourful little thing. This is Mesonites philoboni. So tree hopper will usually do. So it has basically a straw for a mouth, and it punctures the tree, and it sucks out the sugars. So it's essentially living a parasitic life, like an aphid, slower breeding. But the thing is, because they will often do that on the softer wood near the tips, on a lot of trees, because they've been having that happen to them for thousands and thousands of years, they actually need that stimulation to kill the tip to make them branch.
Okay.
So even an insect that on the face of it looks like it's damaging something, I mean, it is literally damaging it, but the tree needs that type of damage.
Okay.
In some cases.
Beneficial to one another.
Yes. So everyone benefits. It's not a zero-sum game. And here you have an insect that is not really a gardener's friend. You can see the real distortion in this tip here. So that's caused by these ants are Campanosus. They're carpenter ants, but some people call them sugar ants because they really love the sugar sap that aphids produce, and they are actually farming aphids in amongst the crevices of this new growth. You'll often see that on your citrus trees at home as well. Several different types of ants will do that, but they protect the aphids from predators, and that means that the aphids then reproduce at numbers that wouldn't normally naturally happen. But what does then happen is there are predators that have found a way to evade the ants. So there's a type of butterfly, and most people don't think of butterflies as carnivorous, called a woolly legs, and its caterpillar, it looks more like a sort of round slug, is highly carnivorous from the moment it hatches. It feeds only on aphids and scale bugs. And it also produces a chemical so the ants don't detect it. And so whereas if a ladybird was to come and try and eat these, little red and black beetles that everyone loves in their gardens, if that was to come and try and eat the aphids, the ants would chase it away. If the woolly legs butterfly's caterpillar comes along, it decimates the entire aphid colony. Usually at home, from seeing the butterflies laying their eggs to the aphids being entirely gone is about 2 weeks. Which is not bad timing at all. And especially because once an ant colony sets in, if nothing does disrupt it like that, they can, this species very rarely, but they can kill trees.
They can?
I mean, the same species of ant also acts as a pollinator, so it's not all bad. Nothing is all bad. It's one of the wonderful things about insects. They can be terribly destructive and still be beneficial.
And still very helpful.
The lot of the butterflies are see, not that this is an acre, which is rather worn. You see how the colours on a lot of these butterflies are getting less and less bright. They're just basically going grey in their old age. But their colour is given to them by little tiny scales on their wings, not like a lizard scale, but shaped very similarly, but much, much smaller. And as that gets exposed to more light, as it gets more warm and wet, it just goes grey. And so its warning coloration is gone, and soon a bird won't realise that it's not to be eaten.
Okay.
And then it will probably be gone.
So for how long have you been walking the forest?
This forest, so I probably first came in here in 2004.
Okay.
My father would have come here a lot when he was little, but then I went away, and we live out on the Great East Road, so this isn't very accessible until things like the Talibana Road became more open. Yeah, it's a lovely place to come and walk. I really think more people should. To be able to get to somewhere green and open like this without leaving Lusaka is a real... it's quite special.
It is.
So if we head down here, should be able to get back to the river. Excuse the sound of walking along. A little bit, you can see evidence of other not so wildlife. So this is horses finding their way into the forest reserve. But unfortunately, the forest reserve has lost most of its large wildlife, so this does provide some nutrition for the dung beetles.
Okay.
And dung beetles are themselves, some people think they're unsightly or they're eating dung, but they are burying that dung.
Okay.
And that means they are literally taking manure and putting it in the ground in the process of burrowing, because they're massive insects.
Okay.
They're also aerating the soil, opening it up, letting more water drain into it, and so they're really very useful insects. And so, as much as I might not really encourage people to send their horses grazing in the forest reserve, having something dropping herbivore dung keeps those insects going until our wildlife can come back.
Okay.
So you've got these redder coloured leaves. It's actually in parts of Zambia it becomes a tourist attraction towards the end of winter, when all the trees produce their new leaves. They come out this lovely red colour, and a lot of the hotter end of the spectrum is red light, and so these reflect, as well as the visible red light, they reflect a little bit of the infrared, which means when those leaves are young and tender, they're a little bit more protected from the heat of the sun. It shouldn't really be producing new leaves at the moment. This is just a lucky chance that it is. But they will age into these green leaves over time, whereas in Europe you tend to find the leaves go red as they're about to die. In Africa, most of them come out red and then grow green.
And this darkening, is it a design or...?
So this will be from either a fungus or an insect damaging. Quite often you'll find with sap-sucking insects, there'll be tiny little punctures, but you'd usually expect those more along the vein. But because of the way a plant's immune system functions, it's not quite like ours. If there's damage or disease, it just shuts off the links between cells, and then you have the leaf is perfectly fine, but the cells that it affected, it just closes them off, quarantines them essentially, and they die. And so it's responded to either injury or disease.
Okay.
The brown marks themselves. Oh yes, you have some little white spots here where something has punctured the leaf.
Okay.
And so an insect has damaged, and the plant is responding. Eventually, these leaves will fall off. Fertilizer. So even the damage is productive.
Everything is beneficial in the forest.
Everything is beneficial apart from cutting the whole thing down. Also find the temperature drop here when the leaves come out. Okay. It goes from just scorchingly hot to quite refreshing. There's actually it's a much higher density situation, but on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, there's man-made forests, mostly native trees, but a lot of fruit trees from around the world. And the density of that is only about 10 hectares. So it's not large. It's not even 30 acres, depending which measurement you prefer to use. But that drops the temperature of the surrounding neighbourhood area by an average of 7 degrees annually, which is a huge drop.
It is.
I mean, if you think 40-degree Octobers, drop that by 7 degrees, 33 degrees is quite pleasant, actually.
Yeah, extremely very.
And so if we could have that density of forest even just here, that could drop the temperature not by as much over the rest of Lusaka, but it would drop the surrounding areas temperature quite considerably.
Okay.
So that there are a lot of reasons to preserve these areas.
Okay.
I hope I've taken the right time. It's a little bit dense, and you can see the lantana is trying to take over again as we get closer to the river. Sorry, I will pull her back just now. One. I talked about the measurement for the
Okay.
river. And we have the delightful evidence of literally. Right now we can literally just step across the river in March, when it should be flowing quite well. This is probably not quite the highest it's going to get this year, but not far off. You've got more of those lovely forest satyrs there, the blue and black swallowtails. But also comes to mud. But if you just look over behind you there, you'll see there is a measuring stick in the ground 1.6 meters above the water. That was probably put in during the colonial era or early Coinde administration. I'm not sure when it was put in, but it was put in within the last 100 years
Okay.
to measure the height of the river, and they felt it was necessary to put it up that high.
Because the river
The river was that high, and since then the loss of the forest cover, damming upstream, people pumping out for agriculture. There's been several housing complexes gone up in upstream, and there's just no water. I mean, even when I was 15, this river flowed year round. It didn't even look like this in the middle of October. I used to just down there. I used to catch crabs. When my father was about 15, this was a fairly sizable river, and now it's nothing. so that's loss of the forest.
So sad, eh?
There are some things that are surviving lost, but things like the crabs, which are all our native crabs are potentially edible. They're gone. They need permanent water. And most of the fishes are gone, which is another potential food source for communities
So
surrounding us.
people would come fishing here.
When I was little, people didn't regularly. There were very small fish people would occasionally catch.
Okay.
When my father was little, people would come fishing.
Okay.
It wasn't like a major fishery, but it was something you could do quite locally without having to travel to Kafui or the Lower Zambezi. It's gone.
Sad state, eh?
We're now actually surrounded pretty much by invasive plants. This big tree here is Indian, it's tuna. We've got this poison apple here. I believe it's also Asian. We've got obviously the thickets of lantana on the other side, which are Central American. There's work being done to try and let the native species back in. We have a medicinal tree coming up there, from the stump there. That's a quinine. So that can be used in the treatment of malaria. It's a very valuable tree. Up ahead here we have two large acacias actually surviving. Yeah.
We're done with our forest walk. It was quite pleasant to learn a few things about the forests and how important insects and the trees are to each other and to us as human beings. For anyone that would like to get in touch with William, feel free to seek his advice on farming and how important insects are to the well-being of the environment. It's been a pleasure having you. Stay green.